While I consistently sought support to assist with measuring the impact of our arts education programs and establishing consistency in program delivery, only one donor, over the course of 3 years, provided funding for technical support in this area. Resources, though, were available to hire consultants to produce strategies for audience development, marketing, communications, increasing our earned revenue, board development, strategic planning. The list goes on and on. But while some arts institutions do benefit greatly from their board members' personal and professional resources, most community-based institutions are challenged to attract experienced directors for reasons that you are all fully aware of. I believe that we can agree that board training cannot transform a trustee who may love the institution dearly, but who has no viable contacts, has no interest in becoming a salesperson, and who just does not inherently possess those skills. They cannot become a fundraising engine in the short term. Understaffed arts organizations can ill afford to focus their efforts on training board members to become fundraisers, an extremely time-consuming process at the cost of dedicating those human resources to generating income for the institution, especially in an environment where funding sources are contracting and the organization's existence is tenuous. There are many things that community-based arts institutions do extremely well, and they've done with all of your support, but few outside of this room are aware of them. Sadly, also, many of those capacities and accomplishments are not tied to earned revenue that directly benefits the institution. However, they do contribute to the economic security of some of their community's residents and artists. Arts organizations are often the largest employers of artists in their communities and sometimes their entire cities. As opportunities for artists to earn income in their industries become scarcer and scarcer, the more fortunate rely on the arts institutions in their community as their sole source of revenue. On an almost weekly basis, we learn about more and more arts organizations nationwide that have closed or have announced their plans to close. And it is urgent that as arts funders and arts supporters, we determine how to best support our existing grantees, but not at the expense of establishing or increasing direct support to artists. This is a more critical issue now because many of the organizations that have historically served as our conduits for donor support to artists are now overwhelmingly focused on their own survival, as they should be. As donors, our relationships with our grantees has developed to the point where we expect our grantees to function as honest brokers between us and our community, the community. But this has sometimes resulted in a virtually non-existent or superficial relationship between the donors and the target constituents. Rarely do they know the identity of the underwriter of a program from which they are receiving a benefit unless there's a logo on a banner outside the building. An expanded dialogue between arts administrators, donors, and their shared constituents would go a long way to reducing perceptions of isolation and displacement among members of the communities that we support. I also think that the focus on partnerships amongst arts organizations, and this is something that was very much a part of our existence over the last 2 to 3 years at the Harlem School of the Arts, sometimes excludes other forms of partnerships that can be beneficial not just to the arts organization, but also to members of the community, and by extension, raise the perception of value of those arts institutions. For example, when I joined the Harlem School of the Arts, I'm a very mission-driven person. I love legacy. I love those people who started everything. I mean, God, how amazing are they, really? I mean, to start in the basement of a church with 12 children and end up building a structure and creating an institution that's impacted over 80,000 lives in the last 45 years. I start my day thinking, okay, what would Dorothy Maynor have thought of this idea? And oftentimes I end up saying, I don't think this is what Dorothy Maynor had in mind. Thanks. Yes. So far, so good. But I say that because we found that in the last year and a half, our most successful partnership was with a social service organization that served foster care youth in our community. I was very challenged in how to identify ways to become more relevant to the core constituents that Dorothy Maynor founded that institution to serve, those who had nothing and those who had no access to the arts under any other circumstances. Anyone who walked into the Harlem School of the Arts, any child, clearly had an advocate in their lives, whether it was their grandmother, their aunt, their uncle, their mother, their father. Someone crossed the threshold with them. And I really started to think a lot about who those kids were and realized, it's that foster care system that they disappear into, and we don't know who they are. So I was very fortunate through one of our major donors to meet with a woman, Dorothy Worrell, who runs Harlem Dowling, which is the oldest foster care agency in New York, and was started as the home for colored orphans over almost 300 years ago. We met, I looked at our registration, I said, okay, we're going to try this. We have to develop this as we go along. Here's the criteria. We are not a social service agency. I'm not Joe Clark with a baseball bat walking down the hallway here. We're Fleur-Elise and little kids and big kids, and we can't give any more than we can give, which is an exposure to the arts and hopefully to instill a love for the arts and provide more people, give this child more people in their lives who care for them and who are there to help them grow into productive human beings. We started out with 11 kids in January of 2008, no funding, and we slotted them in wherever we could, including the child who walked through the door and must have just had an August rush moment because she insisted on learning how to play the cello. And I thought, wow, a foster care child who wants to learn how to play the cello, not the violin, not the guitar, not the piano, the cello. Give her the cello, please. So the other one wanted to play the trumpet. Let him blow. So we had an incredible first semester. All of the fears that some may have had were never realized. We were able to raise support for the funding, for the program to expand to 32 kids the following year, and then most recently have expanded to 51 children. This program has had an impact far beyond anything that we could imagine, and I just use it as an example because there is opportunity out there in corners that that are beyond the world that we inhabit on a day-to-day basis. And when I say opportunity, I don't mean necessarily opportunity for funding. I mean opportunity to become more relevant to your community. And the more relevant we are to our community, the more our community is inclined to fight for us. And we need them to fight with us, and we need their voices to also be loud, as Janet was saying earlier. We need their voices to join ours, otherwise we will not be loud and bold. We will just be us. So community-based arts organizations today, as you well know, are more vulnerable than ever because their survival now depends upon exposing their weaknesses to donors in a relationship that is political by virtue of its resource-driven power dynamic. This is the elephant in the conference room table between us and grantees, and then on the other side between grantees and donors. And I think it's time for us to address that openly and to be able to have a dialogue where these organizations can be wholly honest about what their condition is because they know that this is the way to either start down the road to recovery or at least understand where you are today.